Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sanderson Gulch Outdoor Classroom and Pollinator Garden first public meeting. My name is Lori Tabachnik, and I'm an Associate Parks Planner with the Denver Parks and Recreation Department. I and the rest of the project team would like to thank you all so much for taking the time to be here tonight. We know it's a really hectic time for everyone, so we are just really grateful that you carved out some time to be with us. We also wanted to thank the Council District 7 for being on the call tonight, and also just for being such a big proponent and supporter of this project. We're really excited to present our ideas to you and to hear what feedback you have for us. So we first wanted to introduce you all to our project team. As I mentioned, my name is Lori, and I'm the parks planner on this project. My counterpart, Ian, will also be on the call later today doing the question and answer portion. He is the project manager and also with the city's Parks and Recreation Department. We also have Allison and Andrew on the call, who are on our consulting team. They're helping with ecological restoration and landscape design, and you'll be hearing from them shortly. So this is a quick overview of what we'll be discussing tonight. First, we'll be going through an introduction of the virtual meeting format, and then an introduction of the project itself. We'll also be discussing the existing conditions of the park in its current state, and in turn, we'll show you two concept designs for the improved park landscape. Finally, we'll turn it over to you guys to hear your feedback. So since the virtual format is new to a lot of us, we thought it would be helpful to kind of orient you to the tools that you have in order to communicate with us, ask us questions, or give feedback. First, please note that this meeting will be recorded and will be posted to the Denver Parks and Recreation website. So it will be available for anyone that happened to be unable to attend the meeting, or if you want to go back and watch it, it will be there for you. During the meeting, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box. We'll be monitoring the chat and collecting any questions, and we'll be answering them at the end. After the meeting, we encourage you to take our survey, which is listed here, that will ask you about preferences on which concept design you prefer. Feel free to pass this along to any neighbors or friends that might be interested in this project and weren't able to come tonight. All right, so a little bit of the project history. As many of you may know, in September 2018, the Grandoozy Music Festival was held at nearby Overland Golf Course. A portion of the proceeds of the music festival were allocated to improvements in the neighborhood. After a community process led in coordination between the council district and the Parks Department, the community decided to improve Sanderson Gulch by adding pollinator gardens and the potential for an outdoor classroom. And that brings us to today, where we are advancing this vision and really excited to do that. Taking this vision as a foundation, the goals of this project are ultimately to, one, create a beautiful pollinator garden for the neighborhood to enjoy, explore the opportunity for an outdoor classroom, improve the trail connections through the park, and restore native habitat.
All right, so that brings us to the location. And I'm Andrew. I'm from Ripley Design on the landscape design side. So I'm going to bring you through kind of where the project is. So it sits just east of Federal Boulevard and just west of Ruby Hill Park, just west of the South Platte River there. You can see on the right side of the screen. and just south of Godsman Elementary School. And Sanderson Gulch itself runs through the park, and we're really looking at the northern half of the park that's really closer to the elementary school itself. So when we're looking at the existing conditions on the site today, the area is really, at the moment, much of it is an open field. There are several asphalt paths that cross through the site, as well as one existing concrete trail that kind of ends right kind of in the middle. You can kind of see with my mouse here showing the indication of where it is if you're watching on the screens. And then another thing to note is that there's an existing footpath that cuts from this neighborhoods to the south directly up towards this school. And right now that's just kind of an informal footpath that goes up a steep hill towards that Godsman Elementary School.
Hi everyone, my name is Allison. I'm an ecologist with Cedar Creek Associates. I'm involved in the ecology restoration science project. The park as it stands right now is in mediocre condition. Throughout the uplands, the blue portion, it's dominated by noxious species, not a lot of beneficial plant species and native species there. Along Sanderson Gulch, towards the east, it is primarily willows. Looks pretty good down there. High ecological function, lots of native species, lots of biodiversity. And off to the west, you're gonna see more native or non-native species. These include like Siberian elm, and it's mixed in with other native species. So it has relatively high ecological function as it stands, despite the fact that it's dominated by noxious species.
All right. So that brings us to some of our precedents. And these precedents really serve as images to kind of get the community thinking, kind of to options of what could be there, as well as kind of spark ideas for other things that, that we're thinking about, as well as other ideas that you might have. So the first precedent images here we see are the pollinator gardens. And when we're thinking about pollinator gardens for Sanderson Gulch, we're thinking about native flowers and plants. But we're also thinking about ways that we can interact with those. So either placing those along or next to paths, as well as potentially having areas where you can step off the trail if that's on a soft surface area, maybe benches or larger stone boulders that we could use as benches to sit on and take a break and enjoy the area. And then we're also thinking about different ways that we can enhance the kind of the ecological values a little bit by placing maybe down logs or different ground covers in the gardens themselves, such as stones or sand beds. And then finally, we're also thinking about kind of potentially even adding vertical elements, such as habitat homes for different insects or pollinators that might be visiting the gardens. So the next set of precedents is the outdoor classroom. So we're thinking about the outdoor classroom. We've got a lot of different opportunities. We've got opportunities for thinking about stones that can be used as seating or just benches themselves. Thinking about kind of wooden stumps that could be used as seating, or kind of a soft surface such as like a gravel or a mulch that can be used under the feet, or something different such as a harder surface like concrete or stone pavers. If we ended up going with a concrete route, you could also think about different imprints or finishes that we could add to that concrete, such as you can see up on the right. They could be designs or words, something educational or inspiring. And then we could also go with a different route, such as kind of a more inspiring or crafty kind of way, such as the image on the bottom right, showing more of kind of like a stone circular path. And then, as well as an outdoor classroom, we're also thinking about ways that we can potentially interact with the creek, ways that we can get people closer to it and potentially even use it more. So we definitely are thinking about kind of a restored edge or a more kind of vegetated edge, which you can see on the left there. But then there's also opportunities for a much more kind of formal or like a harder edge, which would be stones guiding the edge of the creek to allow people to come right up to the edge, or kind of a mix of that, which might be a path leading up to an area where you could enter onto stone boulders into the creek.
So with regard to restoration, our main goal is to enhance the biological quality and diversity of the park. Our overarching method to do that is to plant native plant communities that mimic historical natural communities in the area. So we've looked to some other successful restoration projects in the general region to provide some insight to the project. They focused on native plants, pollinator gardens, and other high quality grasslands and parks and other community spaces. One of the primary benefits is that native plant communities don't require as much maintenance or resource inputs comparatively to bluegrass lawns or planted ornamental species. The species we're utilizing are adapted to regional conditions, climate, precipitation, temperature extremes. By utilizing a biodiverse array of species, we can create an ecosystem that's more resilient to stressors. So maybe this means that when we have maybe a wet year, a dry year, different expressions of those plant communities come out, but the community overall persists over time. This also allows us to reallocate water resources to other needs. So we anticipate only a temporary need for irrigation, and by supporting biodiverse plant community, and especially when that's suited to the region, no long-term irrigation is planned after the plants are established. Additionally, restoring a biodiverse vegetation community will bring wildlife, and these photos represent some of the plant communities and species that we're going to be restoring. High forb mixes, native grasslands, and yeah, so we'll be prioritizing seed mixes that emphasize flowers within and nearby the pollinator garden to kind of tie in both a native community and a more built community. And we're going to showcase a variety of grass species. These grass species have a variety of visually appealing and interesting seed heads, so it's going to be pretty cool.
All right, and that brings us to our first concept. All right, so you can kind of see here in this concept, you can orient yourselves with elementary school just to the north there. And so the first thing I'd like to bring your attention to is a new crosswalk that brings or connects kind of that school and the neighborhood to the north to Sanderson Gulch. And that crosswalk would be then directly connected to a path in this concept that would bring you past pollinator gardens and then around to an outdoor classroom. And that outdoor classroom in this concept sits on top of a hill, so, or sits sunken into the side of a hill. So you can kind of see here some of the topo lines. The classroom is facing towards Sanderson Gulch itself, and the edge of the classroom would be lined, if you look up in this kind of blow up of the classroom, with a concrete seat wall that would allow for opportunities for impressions or potentially some sort of scribing into the concrete if we would like to do something like that. In this classroom, we also have benches for allowing for kids to come and sit and have an outdoor lesson. And then, so as you make that path around the outdoor classroom, we've got these small pockets of pollinator gardens. And those gardens allow for small moments for individuals to interact with the garden. They also allow for different breakout sessions if an educational opportunity or group is out there using it to spread out and use individual gardens. It also has a second pollinator garden that's not attached to the classroom, and that's over on the western side of the site. You can see the blow up of this garden up on the upper left of your screen. And this outdoor, or this pollinator garden really acts as like an entry feature to Sanderson Gulch, allows people that are just entering on that west side to come in, step off of the main path, and relax and sit down on a bench in the garden. The garden also utilizes different boulders as well as logs and different sand beds to kind of enhance the pollinator habitat in that area. So in this concept, we have the existing alignment of the asphalt trail that runs through the park, and that remains. That's the same path, although instead of staying asphalt, it's changed to a soft surface trail in this concept. And then we've also added a soft surface trail that connects the crosswalk to the elementary school down to the neighborhood trails to the south. So this is really just formalizing that small path that's already there, creating a little more accessibility for the children and kind of giving it a harder or a more formal edge against the grass plantings around it. This concept, we also have a connection to the water. So that's just off of this main path that runs on the south side next to Sanderson Gulch. And this path, if you remember right, used to end right here and then from concrete and then was asphalt the rest of the way. In this concept, it is becoming all concrete, and it has that connection down to the river. So that connection, you can see a little blow up down here on the bottom of the screen. It is a path down to a little area that is provides some stone paving and then some boulders for seating on the edge of the bank, as well as boulders that are sitting in the creek that allow for opportunities for kids or visitors of the park to kind of get a little closer to the creek. Yeah. And that is all for concept number 1.
So for both restoration concepts, our goal is obviously to create a beautiful and enjoyable landscape for the community to use. But we can also use restoration to provide less obvious benefits for the community and users. The plant communities chosen and overall design of the park support a variety of ecosystem services, resiliency, erosion control, pollination, etc. In orange, these plant communities have been chosen to maximize erosion control, particularly the darker orange. It's built around the slope. We've chosen a high forb mix that surrounds the community garden, the pollinator garden and the outdoor classroom to hopefully draw some more pollinators to that area. Along the sides here, along the blue, we're keeping the native or the existing riparian vegetation, just because even where it's non-native, it's relatively high functioning. Additionally, so with regard to ecosystem services, we have chosen to emphasize ecosystem services in these orange areas in the uplands that are more ecosystem based, whereas in the pink with our high forb community, we're trying to really create a sense of place, education, stress relief, really emphasize ecosystem services that benefit humans more directly. Both the location and composition of these plant communities are meant to minimize the amount of inputs with regard to maintenance and irrigation. So along the pink, we may have more irrigation in that area just to establish those plant communities, as well as in the parts of the uplands, but we don't anticipate a need for irrigation beyond 2 years. Our goal is really to maximize biodiversity and health for the ecosystems and hopefully create an enjoyable park space for the community at the same time.
All right, and so this is just a review of the key concepts from the first concept, but we'll leave this for visitors that are not with the meeting. So we'll jump into the second concept. So in the second concept, I'll orient you again. Here's the elementary school. We have the crosswalk connecting the elementary school to the park. And then extending off that crosswalk, we have a new path that in this concept is all concrete. And that brings us out to the edge of a hill that overlooks Sanderson Gulch. And that's the location that we've placed the outdoor classroom in this concept. The outdoor classroom in this concept is, instead of sitting into the hillside, is on top of the hillside. And large stone boulders are used as seating elements, as you can see in the blow up on the upper portion of the screen up here. In both concepts, we have a bike rack that's located next to the outdoor classroom. And then in this concept, we have the pollinator garden, which is directly attached to the classroom. There's a small space in between that allows for a little bit of separation from the classroom and the pollinator garden itself. And then there's also several boulders that are placed throughout the pollinator garden that allow for individuals to come and sit, or individuals in a class to come and use as teaching and usable space for learning. Again, the pollinator gardens in this concept include logs, boulders, and different ground covers to improve habitat quality. And then in this concept, the path then extends from that outdoor classroom and connects down to directly to the crossing of Sanderson Gulch. As well as the first concept, this second concept here continues the concrete path all the way along Sanderson Gulch. So before it was half asphalt. And on the northern side, there's a new trail alignment. So instead of using the existing trail, the asphalt trail, this new trail is pushed a little bit further north and is also a soft surface trail. In this concept, there's two connections to the water instead of one connection, which was in the first concept. The first one is in the same location as the first concept, and the second one is just to the right, down next to some trees, which provide a little more shade in that connection to Sanderson Gulch. Those connections to the water are both the same as the first. The trail leads down to an area that is paved with stones, and they allow for boulder seating on the edge of the gulch, and then actual stones and boulders in the water to allow for more access and more use of that water. And then on both concepts, we have trash facilities that are located next to the entrances of the park to allow for an easy pickup and also removal of any trash that visitors might have.
So our restoration goals also apply to this concept. The biggest change here is that we have obviously changed the location of the high forb mix. Forb meaning flowers, by the way, hopefully. That's came across. So we've chosen this place right here. We've chosen right outside the outdoor classroom in the pollinator garden, again, to maximize those ecosystem services that directly apply to humans. That's the biggest change in this park. It's maximum visibility. People can interact with it. It supports the education that's going on in the more built native environment. Other than that, yeah, we've chosen a very similar concept just to maintain some of the erosion control that is going on in that steep slope.
So then this side is just quick key points of that second concept, and this will be provided for those that aren't in the meeting today.
Okay, so thank you everybody who was presenting before this point to give a little bit of context around the project and what our goals are in moving forward. So before we go into the Q&A section, I just wanted to go over the next steps. First of all, there will be a survey that's accessible through this link and also on the Denver Parks and Recreation website with the info about this project. And you can fill that survey out and provide any additional comments that you may have after this meeting here if you forgot about it or you wanted to think about it a little bit more and then provide some feedback. So that survey will be available and accessible until the 25th of September. So that's just about a week from now for you to provide any comments and feedback. Definitely feel free to send this out to any other community members or anything like that. After this presentation and after looking at this survey, we're going to continue to develop the design. So we're going to incorporate the feedback that you as community members give us on these designs here, and we're going to try and synthesize all of that together into one very cohesive concept design. And then after that, we are going to hold another meeting loosely in mid-October to again kind of provide a little bit of an update on that synthesized cohesive design for any final amounts of feedback that you may have. Then after that meeting, we will finalize the design and then begin to develop construction documentation. And once we get that construction documentation, we'll actually be able to begin the construction on the park, actually installing all of these really cool features that we're talking about right now. So it's going to be an exciting project. Looking forward to hearing what you all have to say about it. So this is now the time for any questions or comments that you all have through this presentation. A couple of guiding questions would be what concept do you like best, and specifically what is it about that concept that drew you to it? Also, like which outdoor classroom location do you find a little bit more suitable, more accessible, that kind of thing. And then also just, is there anything missing in the concepts that you guys would like to see? So these aren't by any means do you have to answer these specifically. You can answer any other questions that you may have about the projects. And I think we're gonna, as questions come in, we can toggle between the different concept designs. So if you want to see them again, just kind of state that in the chat and we can kind of move back and forth as needed. There is one question that came in during the presentation that I wanted to address. This is from Amy here asking if, well, I'll just read the entire question aloud. She's thrilled about the plans to attract pollinators, but wants to know, will there also be measures in place to prevent the use of pesticides and herbicides? So in answering that, getting native areas established can be difficult in some instances because we're combating noxious weeds, and there are quite a large amount of noxious weeds in this site already, as Allison mentioned earlier. So we're gonna have to assess the need for pesticides and herbicides if needed to combat these weeds, and then actually get to a point of solid native establishment. So there is a chance that we will need to use pesticides and herbicides to manage these areas to make sure that we get full establishment. But if there is any use of pesticides and herbicides, we will make that very, very clear and advertised on site through the use of flagging or other means like that. So it will be very clear if any are used and when they were used as well. Does that answer your question? Please let me know, like in the chat, just give me a thumbs up, or if you want me to follow up on anything to make sure that I've answered that completely. In the meantime, we also have some questions from Erica, who has a couple, so I'll just kind of start right at the beginning here. We really like the pollinator gardens, but the proximity to the outdoor classroom areas brings up concerns. Her 9-year-old son who gets nervous about being swarmed by bees. So that is actually something that we considered in the designs for these classrooms. So we put in a little bit of a buffer in between the classroom and the pollinator gardens themselves. That was something we were thinking about pretty intensely in developing these concept designs. And that buffer will be multiple, like kind of double digits in feet in length as we have it in these designs here. So we felt that that was enough of a separation between the pollinator gardens and the classroom themselves. But that's definitely something we're aware of going forward, and we want to be careful of that. However, also a lot of native pollinators are not going to be the kind of typical larger bees that we see. They'll be a lot smaller. and they're not actually ones that really sting all that much. So native pollinators generally look pretty different than some of the larger, like kind of honeybees and wasps and stuff like that. Obviously, they'll be drawn to this area as well, but I think it's important to note that that's not going to be the sole species that will be drawn to these types of areas.
And I can jump in real quick. And so to give you an idea of the distance, right now on that second concept, the outdoor classroom, the right down here is between 10 and 16 feet away from the closest plantings in this concept, just to give you an idea of scale and how far that looks on these concepts. So
totally, thank you for that clarification. Again, let me just post in the chat if I'm not fully answering any of these questions or if you want any clarifications. But I will continue going down with the next question that Erica has asked. Will there be additional maintenance of the existing riparian vegetation areas? They often get choked with weeds and catch trash, especially near the bridge, thinking manual removal rather than herbicides. That's a great question. That was actually something that we were talking about and thinking about as well, especially, yeah, right along that bridge area there. And we've been talking with our operations team about figuring out the best way to work with this area and make sure that that vegetation isn't encroaching on that bridge at all, because sight lines there and seeing if a bike is coming from the opposite direction can be pretty hard. So there are discussions to stay a little bit more on top of the management there. And we were, for that specific location, talking about manual removal. So that is how we would be conceptually dealing with the issue there. There is a chance, again, that we may have to use herbicides, but the first train of thought for removing that vegetation right by the bridge was manual removal. So the next question, either scale is off or the actual features are pretty small, especially to the connection to the water feature. Andrew, I think you might be the best to answer there.
I can definitely help out with that one. Scale is definitely something that's hard to tell, especially when you're looking at plan views. You can kind of see, to give you an idea, a car on the screen here, just down here. So that's, cars usually typically close to 10 feet long. So just to give you an idea of scale, that connection to the water is a little bit longer than a car. And when we were thinking about that space, these are certainly up for, changing too. We're not saying that this is the way it is, but when we're thinking about that space, we're specifically thinking about, a single class going down or a small group of visitors. So that was the idea there, something that is between 10 and 20 feet wide. But that was our first original intent. And then you can kind of see in this upper one up here, the benches are really small in that outdoor classroom, but those would be standard size benches. So there would definitely be plenty of room for a class to come and gather from the elementary school. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Awesome, yeah, I think that was super helpful, thank you. The next question is, will there be any grading work? I'm gonna assume that question is kind of directed towards some of the trails and around the outdoor classrooms. Again, if it's not, let me know, but I'm gonna move forward with interpreting the question that way. And we will be doing some earth moving definitely around the classrooms to be able to make sure that we're building on a flat area there. Grading work will be assessed for whatever trail design is chosen. So we will potentially have to be doing some grading there, for example, in a concept design 2, or regrading some of the areas around the asphalt trail to make sure that that slope is compliant. So there will be some grading work done there. Currently, we're not imagining like a massive amount of earth moving or anything like that. So it's not like we'll be kind of removing and recontouring the entire park. We're just going to be editing the lines as needed to make accommodations for the trails that we're putting in and the classrooms.
Yeah, I'll jump in too, Ian, if that's all right. That first concept, up on the top is utilizing that existing asphalt trail. So hopefully there'll be minimal grading in that concept. We really wanted to think about that as well as when we made that connection to the south. In the second concept, we took a little bit more liberty. And so that's when you see that new trail would create a little bit more work. And then that connection to the south in that second concept is graded to make it a little bit more of an accessible route. So there would definitely be more grading in this second concept than there would be in this first concept.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, how long will the park be inaccessible while being revegetated? So that is kind of the grand question right there. It's all just mostly a matter of kind of like how quickly we can get through the design process, how quickly we can actually begin construction, all of that kind of weather permitting as well. So the timeline we're looking at now is we're kind of hoping to have this well underway, given like the summer of 2021 next year. We're hoping to be moving right along by that point. Again, this is a loose timeline and there are a lot of other factors that can kind of contribute into that. But once we kind of get the trail alignments complete and the outdoor classroom put in terms of the revegetation, we can actually have those areas delineated, have it very clear where they are, and we can open up the trail access to these things while the revegetation is taking place. So it'll be mostly the kind of heavier construction style stuff that we're going to be hopefully getting done in early 2021. Any other comments on that anybody wants to contribute? Cool, okay. Are there plans to involve the Godsman students in planning and age-appropriate work? This question was asked by David, and we plan on working with the school to kind of like, they were one of the main drivers as like why we wanted to create an outdoor classroom in this area. They provided some feedback there. Lori, you may have a little bit more history there than I do. But there are plans on having them involved, and it definitely, like, as we're kind of moving forward with creating this outdoor classroom, we want to make sure it's accessible to the students actually in the school there. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Lori.
Thanks, Ian. At the moment, we don't have solid plans, but since the schools are really overwhelmed right now with all the switching to virtual schooling and figuring out COVID times, but yes, like Ian mentioned, we definitely have plans to involve them moving forward and seeing if there are opportunities to involve the kids, because we would love that.
Awesome, thank you. The next question here from Spencer: given the benefits of pollinators, has any consideration been given to communal/educational gardening space for neighbors and students? So in terms of urban gardening, that is kind of a program that is taken over. I'm struggling to remember the exact organization that handles a lot of the kind of community garden spaces, but that's outside directly of Parks and Recreation. So we had not considered the idea of putting in a community garden in this space at all, due to the fact that that's kind of run and organized by a different entity than Parks and Rec itself. So yeah, that was not something we were kind of exploring with this area here. This is from Amy regarding herbicides. So her question is the idea to tier it down over time. I would hate to have the park attract bees only to poison them. So again, with herbicides and pesticides, that's something we have to assess as the project develops. Once things are established, they often do require less intensive use of herbicides and pesticide use. So that is really what we want, is to develop a really well-established native area that becomes incredibly resilient to noxious weeds. So by design, we want to create an area that is a lot easier to manage, a lot less time intensive, and in the long run, again, by design, won't require the need for as much intense herbicide use as a turf field, for example, would be. So that is the goal behind having some of these native areas. Again, I can't really make any promises in terms of how much we will have to use to get these areas established. It's just the state of the site right now is pretty inundated with these things, and it would be really, really hard to get that level of native establishment we want without some of their use. The next question is by, I believe, Helen. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But the question is, I work with the Pollinator Action Network, and we have been excited about this project. Our group had hoped to be involved in the pollinator garden, and I'm deeply concerned that you'll be using herbicides to establish the pollinator garden. We need to protect the pollinators. Our group has met with CM Clark and would love to work with PNR to utilize non-lethal methods to help plants become established. I'm definitely hearing you guys' concerns over the use of pesticides and herbicides here. That's something we will note, and we're definitely gonna do our best to explore alternatives. We definitely want to make sure that we are creating an area that is conducive to supporting pollinators and is not going to cause them any harm. So we're going to explore as many options as we can. But again, we don't want to rule out the use of pesticides and herbicides in getting this established. Are there plans for an urban beekeeper to have a hive on site? This is from David. No, there are not current plans to have an urban beekeeper on site. I think that's a pretty neat idea, though. I'm not sure exactly the processes that we would have to go through for that, but I do think it is a pretty cool idea. And urban beekeeping is becoming more and more common. I think it's a really interesting concept, and it's been really successful in areas. My only concern with that is honeybees are not actually native to this area. So if we want to be creating habitat for native pollinators, honeybees would actually be kind of competing with them a little bit for the already somewhat scarce resources that they have access to. So that would kind of be a question about how does the community feel? Do we want to support urban beekeeping, or do we want to support native urban pollinators? So there are just some nuances to that, in addition to some questions regarding the proper means of getting everything approved for that as well. So that wasn't something we were looking into at this point. The next question is from Erica Augustine. Got disconnected and missed the answers to a couple of her questions. I'll go back to review the recording. Okay. Amy is asking us, it's fantastic that you're planning on involving Godsman students throughout the process. That would make a lasting impact and value add across the community, not just with the park, but how the community relates to the park. That's an awesome comment. Yeah, we totally agree with you on that. And we're really excited about the prospect of working with them. As Lori stated, like, COVID has kind of made all of that a little bit more questionable as to what it looks like, but we're very, very open and really excited to figure out what it looks like and figure out the best way to incorporate them and make sure that this space is going to be useful to them to potentially like hold classes when classes will be held in person again, hopefully sometime in the not too distant future. Next comment is from Spencer. So a follow-up, have you collaborated previously, or are you open to future collaboration with communal gardening organizations on this project? Would additional funding be needed to be secured elsewhere if it's a possibility? I know, again, little late in the day, not remembering all of my correct terms here, but I know there are some like sustainable community initiatives that are around the city that Parks has worked with before and had communication with around projects kind of similar to this one. And that is a level of partnerships that Parks is trying to get a little bit more involved in. So I think we're definitely down with kind of hearing what any comments that you guys have, any ideas that you may have for different types of management practices and that kind of thing that we potentially may be able to explore. So yeah, that's a partnership that we want to grow in the future.
Yeah, Ian, I'll just jump in real quick. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that, as you said earlier, that there is Denver Urban Gardens, which is we do partner with them sometimes on different park projects. So it's something that we can look into. But again, no promises, but it's a really good comment, and we can definitely look into what a partnership with them would look like.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. Amy understands the ambiguity of pesticides and herbicides, but thanks for answering the questions, being forthcoming. Thank you for understanding as well. We appreciate that. David is asking us for involving the students would decrease vandalism in the future. Yeah, totally. I think having community engagement, community buy-in, having ownership of these parks in the community is really important and beneficial and kind of, yeah, decreasing instances of vandalism and stuff like that. And it just makes the park a more integrated part of the community. So we wanna design it in the way that suits the community best. And we want everyone to be as involved as possible. Gonna ask a little bit of a self-serving question here. Are there any feelings on concepts that are being liked, like is concept 1 being liked more, is concept 2 being liked more? Are there any thoughts on that that you guys have or would like to share? Or any other features in the park that aren't represented in these concepts that you as community members feel like would be important to add? And if you want to take some more time and look at the concepts and either review this presentation, again, there is that survey available as well. Yeah, definitely. Those paths are in pretty rough shape, Erica. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Amy and Spencer. David likes number 2, but would like many more plantings. So I think I can shed a little bit of light on that as well. So in the maps showing the restoration areas in the pollinator gardens, those will be kind of a little bit heavier, more maintained pollinator gardens. But if we go back to the map showing the restoration areas that Allison was talking about, we will have a high instance of forbs included in these areas here. So forbs being wildflowers, different types of flowering plants that will provide pollen and habitat for the pollinator species there. And there will also be forbs mixed in the grass areas here as well. So there will be flowers present throughout, the entire park if we get the establishment that we're really looking for here. These pink zones in the pollinator gardens just kind of delineate some more higher concentration areas. Spencer, the additional attention to the Tejon crosswalk is appreciated. Yeah, definitely. We are working with Dottie on this to kind of get that installed, and yeah, again, address the needs for having a safe crossing for students there. Laura is asking what a forb is. So that is basically a type of flowering plant species. So if you think about the different types of like asters that we have here in Colorado, very common, different types of sunflowers. Penstemons are very, very popular type of forb here in Colorado as well. So those types of flowering plant species. Erica, Sun likes the extra water play area space in number 2. Cool. And when we're going through and synthesizing everybody's comments, we're going to be kind of looking at what people liked and what potentially they didn't like and try and incorporate those in together. So if a lot of people are liking concept 1, but they really like the second water feature, we could look into kind of implementing a second water feature into concept 1, that kind of thing too. So there can be a little bit of a combination of these two concepts here based on what features everybody is liking. Spencer, thanks for coming. We appreciate it. We have another question from Amy. How would Parks and Rec keep the water levels high enough to avoid swampiness, for lack of a better term, in the waterway? So that's a tough question, but a good question for sure. I think a lot of that would really have to do with how the water play area is designed. So making sure that we have sufficient features there to provide a stable area, or making the area a little bit higher than the waterway itself. Using that hard edge is a good way of doing that as well, and making sure that it doesn't get super swampy for folks. Andrew, you may have some more technical experience that you'd like to, or technical throw in on that.
Yeah, I think that you're right. And some of the ways we can try to mitigate that is through kind of thinking about how you can interact with the water. And yeah, I think one of the opportunities we have is kind of thinking about some of those boulders in the water. So if it is a really low water time, and typically the water is further out or lower, or even maybe if it is kind of in that kind of swampier water condition, you might be able to still kind of jump from boulder to boulder and stay out of it at that point. Or if it is a higher water condition, that's why I'm thinking about something that's such as the stone pavers and boulders in that area, something that would really stay there, so it's not going to be washed away if we have a big rain event and there's a lot of water moving through the creek. But certainly things to definitely think about.
So are there any other thoughts on specific features that folks are liking? Specific locations of the pollinator gardens or the classrooms? All right, well, if there aren't any other further questions, just again reiterating, we have the survey online and accessible until Friday of next week. And I believe Lori posted the link in this chat again, so you guys can feel free to click that and fill that out at any time if you come up with any other comments about the project here. And yeah, definitely thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your input, and we want to make this park fit to serve the needs of your community. So being able to speak with you guys and hear your comments and concerns has been really, really helpful for us. And we really appreciate you taking the time out of seems like everybody's having crazy busy days at this point. So again, appreciate you all being here and helping us put this together. so we can stay on until the 6:30 allotted time in case anybody thinks of anything else. But that's all the comments and stuff that we have in the chat thus far.